Hello, I'm Sarah Robinson, Senior Journalist at Nautilus International, and I have with me today my colleagues Danny McGowan and Robert Murtagh. Danny is the Head of International Relations here at Nautilus, and Robert is Communications and Campaigns Organiser. Welcome, Robert and Danny.
Hello, thank you.
Hello.
The reason that Robert and Danny are with me today is that we're launching a major new piece of research by the Nautilus Federation, looking at seafarers' views on the introduction of new fuels and automation. So, Danny, can you tell us what the Nautilus Federation is and how the research project came about?
Thanks, Sarah. Well, the Nautilus Federation is a group of 22 unions, like-minded unions based all around the world. And we get together to sort of improve and develop services for our members, but also to influence policy and undertake research projects such as the previous research projects we've done on automation, on future-proofed, and the work we've done on criminalisation. And now we've moved into this just transition piece of work that we'll talk about today.
How did it come about? I understand that this particular piece of research was launched at the Federation's Liverpool meeting in October 2023.
That's right. And we had been speaking about the just transition for quite a period. And we know that the industry's been doing a fair bit of work on transition to alternative fuels and new energy sources. And then we were looking at it from our perspective as unions representing maritime professionals to say, well, where is our voice in this in this piece of work, in this development for our industry? And where are the voice of seafarers? And so we decided at the Nautilus Federation General Meeting in 2023, our board meeting there, to undertake this piece of research, to get the views of our members and to help, as I say, help influence the work that we do in this area in the coming months and years.
So let's find out a bit more about the actual research, which came to be called Mapping Our Maritime Future. Robert, you were involved in the setting up of the research. How did you gather information from the participants?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I mean, first of all, just to reiterate what Danny said, I think the whole purpose of this was really about trying to centre the voice of our members and Nautilus Federation members in this key piece of work around the just transition. And I think one of the questions, really, one of the more existential questions we had was, do our members know what the just transition is? Are they aware of the concept? And if they are aware, what is their understanding? And so that's how the survey was created, with those questions in mind, really trying to understand our members' understanding of this concept that we talk about, but we're really keen to make sure we're not talking about it in a vacuum. And really the messaging that we were sending out to members is, and it's absolutely what our role is as a union, is to say, we want to hear from you. Tell us what your views are, tell us what you know, and then we will act on that and advocate then on your behalf.
And how many people took up the offer?
Yeah, so we had about 1,000, just shy of 1,000 respondents, which was fantastic. I think we've never really seen across the piece, we've never really seen a survey like this of seafarers that is asking. We see their surveys all the time for seafarers on a wide range of issues. I think this is the first we'd seen that wasn't just talking about decarbonisation through a technical lens, although that was part of it, but also talking about the concept and also talking about, where we think industry has a role to play, where we think government has a role to play, what skills are required, who should fund it, all those really important questions that are about the machinations of how the just transition can come about. And then, as I say, understanding what for us to understand what our members' level of understanding was about this concept, because I think we can talk about the just transition, and we were talking about the just transition. There's a definition at the ILO, the International Labour Organization. It's a concept that is talked about, but does it translate to our members on the coalface? And I think that was one of the key motivations behind the survey, is really understanding, what do our members understand of the just transition? What does it mean to them? And then how can we ensure that the language we use when we're talking about these issues is reflective of what our members' understanding is?
Let's go over to Danny now. Danny, Robert said that a lot of people don't really understand what the term just transition means. Could you define it for us? And could you also talk about the questions that were being asked in the survey?
In short, it's looking at the transition from carbon fuels or carbon-based fuels to alternative fuels and new energy sources. It's looking at this kind of situation, the decarbonisation of the industry, looking at the 2050 goals that we have in place from the IMO, but it's also then looking at what other developments might take place as a result of that change. So looking at things like technological changes, looking at employment changes, all of these areas that generally would feature in what is pretty much an industrial revolution for our industry. And so we as I say, we did a fair bit of work on this, but came up with a definition that we agreed upon to say that the just transition is to promote an environmentally sustainable shipping industry in a way that's fair and inclusive for our members by demanding decent work, paying conditions, and leaving no one behind.
What were we doing in the survey to find out from people whether they felt that they were actually part of a just transition, something which is fair to them? What sort of things did we ask?
We looked at we started by asking, do they think as maritime professionals that the 2050 goals are realistic? Did they think it's something that can actually happen in the next 20 years or nearly 30 years? But we also asked some questions on automation, on technological change. We asked what the desires for the future were of the maritime professionals that were being surveyed, and we then looked at the skills and training that would be needed and what their views were around this area, looking at who should be paying for this, what could be some of the benefits of technological change to maritime professionals, what could be some of the risks as well, and generally how our members want this transition to happen. Because as we know, there are seafarers that are joining the industry now that will be heavily impacted by this. There are those that are further along on in their careers who may not see so much of an impact. It's really important for affiliates of the Nautilus Federation and their members that we have this piece of work to inform what we're doing and inform our input to the industry as we go through these changes.
Thank you, Danny. So let's go over to Robert now. I understand that all of the research is in and the numbers have been crunched. Can you give us a snapshot of the main findings of the research, Robert, please?
A couple of key points coming out of the research, things that really stood out for me. And one of them is the fact that the survey respondents didn't think that that net zero by 2050 was an achievable goal. And why I think that's so important is because that really gets to the heart of everything else, right? The whole point of this drive towards decarbonisation is to meet this target of net zero greenhouse gas emissions around 2050. That's what's been set by the IMO. In the UK, we have a stronger target, which is to reach net zero by 2050. But the people on the ground, the people that are keeping the ships going, the people, the masters on the bridge, the officers, the engineers, they're not seeing that translated into action. And so they don't see that that is actually achievable. So I think, you know, there's a real question here, which is if the people who are at the coalface aren't buying into this target, to this goal, then you know, how achievable actually is it? The fact they don't think it's achievable, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. If they don't think it's achievable, then I think there's a real question about whether it actually is achievable or not. And so then the wider question then comes is, so what do we need to do? We need to make sure that companies that are decarbonising are communicating with their workforce, that seafarers and those working on the vessels are part of these plans to decarbonise, because there are going to be impacts on their working lives. And so it's important that those who are working, the people who are going to be impacted by these changes, have a say over that. I think it's also interesting coming back to this point around, do you know what a just transition is? 46% said no, right? Which I think, again, is a really important question for us to ask. 46% don't actually know what it means. I think that is I guess, a warning for us, right? Which is, if we're going to talk about the just transition, we need to explain it. We need to make sure that it's explained in an easy and digestible way, but also I think crucially that it's tangible, right? That people see the just transition in action, that they can see what the just transition actually means when it comes to their working lives. And that, again, that comes back to the point around having a say. So again, I think that's really important. And then I guess the other key question was around skills and training. And you know, what we can see from the survey is that this is absolutely at the heart of the decarbonisation agenda, which is making sure that our members have the skills to you know, meet the needs of the industry of the future. I think there was just looking here, 40% said they didn't feel they had enough information to understand the industry's transition to alternative fuels and technology. So there's some really stark data points coming out of it. And I think the overall point is this: for us as a union, but for the industry and for governments, there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done to make sure that decarbonisation is done in a way that is people-centred, that is bringing people along, bringing seafarers along this journey. And ultimately, that's what the just transition is about. But there's a huge amount of work to do in order to get to the point where we're actually seeing a just transition and our members are actually understanding what that means. But those are just some of the highlights.
And so, Danny, supposing people want to read the findings for themselves, where can they find the report?
The report is available on the Nautilus International website at nautilusint.org. It's also available on the Nautilus Federation website, and it will also be shared and circulated by the affiliates of the Nautilus Federation. We'll be asking them and their colleagues to share this as widely as possible. And we'll also be sharing it, of course, with the International Transport Workers Federation, who are doing some work on this and who we hope this report will support in their efforts as well.
And I will add to that we are doing a feature distilling the main findings in the September-October print edition of the Nautilus Telegraph. And just going over to Danny, who are you hoping in the wider group of unions will pick up on the research findings, and how will it feed into policy making?
What we hope from this report is that Nautilus Federation affiliates will be able to use it with governments in their own jurisdictions, first of all, so that they will be able to have a discussion in their own countries about this topic. And what we then hope is that will then develop into a wider conversation, both from a government perspective when they're feeding into forums such as the IMO, where Nautilus Federation affiliates, where the ITF will hopefully use this report and its findings as well, but also into the International Labour Organization, where there will be discussions that will take place, where a just transition will certainly feature. It will be something that we'll be able to refer to regularly, and we also hope that it will be referred to by those organisations, by the IMO, by the ILO, for example, as they have done with other reports of the Nautilus Federation, as a really important step in this transition to net zero.
Well, that's all been really interesting, and I'm looking forward to reading the report now. I'd like to remind everybody that you can see the report on the Nautilus International website and on the Nautilus Federation website. And thank you very much for being with me today, Danny and Robert.